So let's talk a little bit about what plant-based means. So at its core, plant-based is just more plant-forward food, right? It means making more of the beans, legumes, vegetables, fruits, the star of the plate, and kind of limiting some of those meat and animal products. As I mentioned, there's different tiers to this. I think the easiest tier, or the first tier, would be flexitarian, which I saw somebody mention doing a couple days a week. I'm with you. Dallas, Raleigh, North Carolina. This is exciting. Okay, cool. So with flexitarian, it means that you might choose a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle a few days a week, but you're not fully vegetarian or vegan, right? So we might still include meat or seafood or animal byproducts throughout the week, but we really try to do some of those plant-based meals. The next tier of plant-based is really more vegetarian, right? And vegetarian had some little categories as well. So with vegetarianism, we generally, by definition, remove animal proteins. So that's usually going to be your land-dwelling animals and or sea-dwelling animals, or fish, I should say. So that would be removing fish, chicken, seafood, beef, pork, all of those lovely things. Most vegetarians do include eggs, right? And some include dairy as well. So that would be what we call a lacto-ovo, or lacto for lactose dairy, ovo for egg vegetarianism. There are some vegetarians that might omit egg or might omit dairy, but still include one or the other. Another form of vegetarianism is pescatarianism. And pescatarian is just the exclusion of those land-dwelling animals, but we do include some of the seafood and fish items in addition to perhaps eggs and or lactose. So those are the couple different tiers there. The other tier, of course, is going to be veganism, and that's where we eliminate not only animal proteins, but all animal byproducts. And this can mean different things to different people. So for example, with vegetarianism, with veganism, we can omit all those animal products, land and sea. And we might also omit our eggs, our dairy, for some vegans, honey as well. And fun fact, for some vegans also might omit white sugar. And interestingly, our white sugar can sometimes have bone char in it, which doesn't that sound delicious, and thus an animal byproduct. So we might eliminate some of that, and also gelatin, depending on the source of animal or product for that. So veganism, no animal products, no animal byproducts, no animal proteins. And then with vegetarian, we have kind of different tiers with pescatarian and some of those of what we include. Let me know if you all have any questions about that as we go through. But I want to jump into talking a little bit about what are the benefits of choosing plant-based. So I think the biggest benefit of choosing more plant-based or a fully plant-based lifestyle is health, of course. When we choose more plant-based foods and reduce our animal products, we tend to reduce inflammation in our body, which can reduce the incidence of chronic disease, which I think is great for everybody. So reducing risk for diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, some of those other lovely things that we want to avoid. They can help reduce some of the side effects and even a diagnosis of chronic disease, right? Improving heart health, reducing cholesterol, hypertension, all the opposite things of what I just noted. And then in addition to that, it also can help boost energy, can help improve skin, can help improve stamina, can still build muscle despite what might be put out there with less protein or protein changes. And lastly, it can be super affordable, right? When we choose a can of beans over a pack of chicken, that's a significant cost savings. Usually a 2-breast chicken pack is going to be $7 to $10, if not more, depending where you buy it. A can of beans or two, about $1. That's a big difference in cost savings. So lots of benefits to choosing a plant-based diet. What are the cons? Well, I think for most people, maintainability can be challenging depending on what tier you choose, right? Whether you're going vegetarian, pescatarian, vegan, etc. The other thing can sometimes be getting bored with food choices, because if we're eliminating a lot of them, we might not have as many to include, right? And the biggest one we always hear is, what about protein? I'm not going to get my protein. That's probably the biggest one I hear. So let's break this down a little bit. Obviously, we're going to give you some recipes today and this month to help support some food variety and give you some ideas and inspiration if you do want to choose some plant-based meals. And we can also work to talk a little bit about ways that we can adapt this into your lifestyle. We'll talk about that today as well. But I think the biggest thing is talking a little bit about these protein sources. So plant-based protein sources. Anybody want to shout out some in the chat? Q&A, go for it. I would love to hear some of your thoughts. And I'm just pulling up because I have the Q&A up in the chat, so bear with me on that. But some great sources, plant-based only, right, or no animal proteins, include things like beans, legumes. Legumes include things like edamame, which we'll include in our recipe today, chickpeas, lentils, peanuts even, right? Also nuts and nut butters are a wonderful source of plant-based protein. Seeds as well, including chia seeds, hemp seeds. Those are wonderful sources of protein. Flax seeds are great for omega-3s. We'll get into that. And then also some of our dairy products. Again, depending if you're going vegetarian or vegan, this may or may not apply, but things like your Greek yogurt, milks, those type of things have great sources of protein as well. And then, of course, some of our soy and soy products. Now, soy is part of the legume family, so I kind of loop that in together. So those are going to be some wonderful sources of protein that you can choose to incorporate. Now, one big thing I notice is when we choose to do plant-based, we start just eliminating that whole protein food group. And we really focus heavily on maybe the carbohydrates or some of those different fruits and vegetables, which is great. But I encourage you to try to make sure that you always have a protein source, plant-based or otherwise, at your meals, because it's so helpful in really helping us feel satiated, helps with fullness after eating. And I look full, I'm pregnant, so don't judge. But fullness after eating also really helps improve energy and can help boost muscle mass, of course. And protein also plays a big part in our DNA and hormone balance, right? So what's great about making sure that we get proteins is we have the building blocks for a lot of our really good hormones that we need, like serotonin to feel good, melatonin to sleep, and all those lovely things that can help boost mood as well. So I say that to say protein, definitely an essential nutrient that we want to include, and ways we can do that is including some of these different foods that I mentioned, okay? And one of them we'll cover today when we do our recipe. I don't know if you can see my edamame over here. All right, some of the other nutrients that we might miss out on, the second biggest thing I hear a lot about is B12, especially with veganism, because we're omitting all animal products. B12 is found only in animal products, and so thus if we eliminate that, hard to get. But fun fact, it is fortified in some of our foods, especially some of our fortified cereals and things like that. And also we can always easily supplement with a B12, easy to do, and then we make sure that we're not deficient. Another micronutrient or vitamin that we might miss out on is going to be iron, right? Obviously our meats are a great source of iron, but don't fret. There's a ton of other high iron sourced plant-based options, including dried fruits, beans, legumes, some of those lovely ones that we can include. And again, iron is fortified in a lot of our cereals, breads, etc. So don't fret about losing the iron, but just make an effort to include that more in your diet. And then zinc is another common one that we might lose out on when we do a little less animal protein. But again, don't fret. A lot of our nuts, beans, legumes, great sources of zinc in there that we can still get those nutrients that we need or micronutrients that we need for zinc. I might recommend too, and again, this is very individualized, so I'm not making claims that everyone needs to be on a multivitamin. However, when you are choosing to eliminate food groups or reduce, it is helpful to maybe start on a multivitamin that has iron, zinc, right? Some of our B12, some of those different nutrients, just so we're making sure that we're getting a little supplementation, especially at the start while we're figuring some of these things out. Okay. Any questions so far? I see some questions here. Classic sign. Oh, what are some classic signs of lack of protein? That is a beautiful question, Juan. Okay. So fatigue can be one of them, right? When we're not getting enough protein, we can definitely feel a little bit more tired. Another subtle sign of lack of protein is after you finish a meal, maybe still feeling a little bit hungry or unsatiated, right? And usually that happens when we omit protein because protein is one of our slowest digesting macronutrients. And why that's helpful and why that helps with satiety is when it digests very slowly, it tends to stay in our stomach a little longer, thus promoting a little bit more of that fullness. So if you notice you're maybe feeling a little bit hungrier after a meal or maybe 30 minutes after eating, try increasing a little bit of the protein source there. That can be a great way to notice. Again, fatigue is common. Challenges with building muscle mass, like especially if you're working out a lot and doing that and not seeing a lot of progress, sometimes protein can be very helpful to support there. I hope that answered your question, Juan. Overall, standard, now mind you, this is a standard, a very general statement, but most people, men to women, need about 45 to 55 grams of protein per day, which is not a huge number, right? Now, that need might increase based on if we have some sort of condition that might need more or less, especially if we're working out or exercising, that can definitely shift some of our protein needs in there as well. Okay, but think about that. That's only, in theory, a couple cans of beans throughout the day, right? Or a breast or two of chicken or some of those things. So we'll break that down a little bit. But I think a lot of people overestimate what they need. Okay, I'm loving tofu, tempeh, seitan, yes, seitan, sorry, I can never say that word. Tofu, wonderful source of protein and plant-based. I love that. Good. Okay, again, I'm going back and forth between the Q&A and the chat, so that's, if I'm looking confusing, that's why. We have eggs for sure. Is there a differentiation between beans and legumes? Great question, Diane. So, in essence, it's just kind of how they grow, right? Versus from a tree and in a pod, or off the stalk, right? So with an edamame, I only have the pea pods, but this is the inside of the legume, and the outside is going to be that, the seed of the legume, and then the outside is going to be the shell. So things that come in shells are considered legumes. That's the only difference. The benefit of both of them is they're high in fiber, high in protein, high in iron, high in all of those. So they're very similar nutrition-wise or nutrient-wise. I cannot speak today. Isn't that great? Nutrition-wise, they're very similar, but just basically how they grow is going to be a little bit different. All right. Is there a difference in the type of B12 in a multivitamin, methylcobalamin and cyancobalamin? There is a difference, but I think as long as you're supplementing with B12, you should be fine. I do want to note B12 is, when we're deficient in B12, it can often lead to megaloblastic anemia, right? Or anemia in general. And so what I always recommend, if you're choosing to go plant-based or have been plant-based for a while, especially vegan, go get your B12 tested, right? And then we can appropriately supplement based on what your B12 comes back at. If we have concerns of anemia or low iron, right, those different things we can kind of troubleshoot that way. So long-term or short-term there, I would say there is a difference, but not a huge difference. Just take the supplement, if that helps. All right, cool. All righty, so I'm thinking, sorry, chat and Q&A. I'm getting back and forth. Okay, so I want to jump into our recipe for a little bit and break down these different ingredients, and then I'd love to open it up again to some additional questions as we move through. Okay, cool. So recipe today. I don't know if anyone's joining me in making it, but we're gonna do an edamame, cranberry, and feta cheese recipe. And I'm gonna kind of tilt you down so you guys can all see, or you all, excuse me, can see what I'm making. So this is a really, really simple recipe. And I think the thing about when we transition to plant-based is we get kind of, oh my God, I got to eat all these tofu dishes. What if I don't like tofu, right? Or thinking of different options. The beautiful thing about plant-based is you have a wide variety of different textures and tastes that you can mix and match to make a simple, quick meal that doesn't take a lot of work, and it doesn't have to be all one flavor, one taste, one profile. So when we do this recipe today, I'll talk about some different ways that we can mix and match. And again, we'll have recipes throughout this month to feature some different plant-based options. But what I encourage is, if you are kind of bored or in a slump with some of your plant-based choices, get on the internet, right? Pinterest it up, look at some different options. There's so many great recipes out there. But anyway, okay, I digress. So we're going to talk about our salad today. So we're starting with edamame. Now this is already shelled, right? So it's just going to come in the pea pods. Fun tip, it can also come in the little pods, which I think are really fun to eat. They make a great snack. And of course you can pop the seeds out if you want to do it this way. But edamame is super inexpensive, usually sold frozen, so shelf stable, right? Can stay for a while in your freezer, so you don't have to worry about food waste, and great way to get protein and fiber. So I do want to note, in one serving, which is about a half cup, right? So about this size, we're getting 9 grams of protein in there, no fat, low sodium, wonderful option, and it has a really nice nutty texture to it. So for this recipe, we're going to do edamame as the base. Now, I just thawed this out, real simple, real nice, clean, easy. I just let it sit out for about 30 minutes on the counter and then rinsed it with some lukewarm water. Of course, you can also microwave it as well. If you're not a fan of edamame, you could always switch out this salad with like a nut or a nut base. You could do like a walnut or almond base, something like that, for a little bit more of a trail mix vibe. You could also, instead of using edamame, or excuse me, nuts, you could do like a chickpea for a different legume if you wanted a little different vibe there. But again, making sure you have a protein source. I'm not sure how good the feta cheese and the cranberries would go with like a bean, like a black bean, but maybe a white bean or something like that could be pretty tasty. So we have our edamame, and I think the recipe calls for about 3 cups, but I just kind of eyed a little bit in this bowl here based on my other ingredients, okay? You can always add more or less. That's the beautiful thing about cooking. You don't have to be specific. All right, so my next ingredient is we have some dried fruit, right? So as we mentioned, dried fruit, great source of iron, also a wonderful source of fiber, right? What I hear most about dried fruit is it's high in sugar, right? And of course, our fruit does have our fructose or natural sugar in it. However, it is a great source of carbohydrate and energy, and of course, fiber, which I mentioned. That fiber is key because it really helps slow down that digestion of the glucose, or excuse me, the fructose that converts to glucose for energy source. So this is a great one to include because we need that energy support. Carbohydrates get a bad rap, but in the plant-based world, you really need them to support energy needs, and they're not just essence for body energy, but also brain. They're a #1 source for that. So if you're noticing brain fatigue or that type of stuff during work, difficulty concentrating, focusing, try adding a little bit more carbohydrate, specifically fiber, to your diet along with this protein. That can be a great tip to help out. So I have my half cup of dried cranberries here. You can always substitute dried blueberries or cherries. I can't speak again. I know I keep saying that. You could also do fresh fruit in here if you wanted to get crazy, right? That can also be an option, but raisins, also a great choice. Lots of different options there. Okay. I think we have some questions. Hold on. Coming in. Nope, just kidding. I hope everybody's still awake. Just kidding. Okay, so we have our edamame, we have our cranberry, and then the last step is going to be feta cheese. One great thing about including dairy is it is a good source for our calcium and vitamin D. That's actually one of the best benefits of dairy. If you want to make this salad vegan instead, What you could do to substitute for some of that creaminess, you could do like some diced avocado or something in there to give it a little bit of that creamy texture. Of course, you can always choose a vegan cheese if you prefer that. But today we're going to do just a vegetarian salad since we're including the feta cheese. I think this salad would also be super delicious with goat cheese as well. So just an option. So we'll go ahead and dump our feta cheese in. Again, I'm going to eye it a little bit. So I have about that much so far. And then the other things, let's mix it a little bit here. Excellent, excellent. So I do want to say this is like a great salad for serving chilled, right? It can be served chilled or a little bit warm if you wanted to heat the edamame up so much that you don't melt the cheese though, or not too much so you melt the cheese. This could also be really good on top of mixed greens if you wanted to add a little bit more iron and folate in there and calcium with some leafy greens. You could do it on a bed of kale. Actually, I use this base of a salad to add with quinoa. That's a really delicious side dish, or it could be a main meal. And I love to add some toasted nuts on top. But just a pro tip if you're interested. If not, live your lives. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit of spray of olive oil here. You can also do a drizzle, but I just had this handy. A little bit of olive oil gives a little bit of a really great heart-healthy fats or monounsaturated fats, which can be really great for us to include, especially if we're doing less seafood and stuff that has really good omega-3s in it. This could be a great substitute to add. I'm going to do a pinch of kosher salt. I prefer kosher salt just because it has a little bit more texture to it in this recipe. And I think that can really add a little bit more crunch and flavor. And then I'm going to do a little bit of cracked black pepper here. I'm a pepper fan. If you're not, omit, not a problem. Mix it up. And we're good to go. And that took me, I think, 5 minutes, not even. I just had to thaw out the edamame. That's probably the longest part. So delicious, easy to do, and versatile, right? Again, it can be served a lot of different ways. You can mix and match a lot of ingredients based on what you have handy at home or what you like or don't like. Easy to make, vegetarian or vegan, and delicious. I do want to note one thing. I get a lot of questions about soy products in general. And should I eat soy, right? Soy is a great source of fiber and protein, as I mentioned, especially in our edamame form. What I generally recommend, actually, let me back up with that. The reason soy got a bad rap is there's a study that came out for postmenopausal women that did note with increased soy intake, higher risk of breast cancer. Again, that's postmenopausal women. Now, read over the study, has some flaws in it, maybe not the biggest sample set, maybe higher sources of, or more amounts of soy than most people would eat. However, soy does have a lot of health benefits as well, and evidence-based does suggest that including more soy in your diet can really help promote overall wellness. So what I usually recommend to my clients is choosing more of your whole soy products like your edamame, your fermented tofu, right? Great option. And trying to limit some of those soy products and processed soys that are found in a lot of our more processed foods. For example, a lot of our like veggie burgers might be a soy base. Again, that can be good sometimes, but you can always go more towards like a black bean-based veggie burger. And then again, soy is put in a lot of our processed foods in general. Usually on the label or in the ingredient list is soy lecithin. So really trying to limit some of that more processed soy and including more whole soy is a great recommendation for overall wellness, okay? I do hear a lot about it with men getting concerned if you're going to have more feminine changes to your body because it does essentially promote estrogen build. Again, I'm not saying you got to eat soy at every meal, but if you're doing soy in moderate amounts with some edamame, some occasional soy milk, you don't have anything to be worried about as far as negative health consequences. Okay, so great options here. All right, let's see about questions. Is it true that soy lowers testosterone? Is there a recommended amount? Okay, so it doesn't lower testosterone. What the thought is it increases estrogen production. So it has a counter effect to the testosterone, right? The back and forth is how significantly does it affect estrogen and testosterone? And again, the evidence is really skewed on if that's 100% yes, no, how that works. Again, there's a lot of studies that have people including soy regularly throughout their day with no concerns of hormonal imbalance or negative health outcomes. So it's a really challenging thing. And I think that's the hard thing about nutrition is there's a lot of back and forth evidence suggesting if something's good or bad. What I, again, recommend, trying to stick to more whole soy. Again, you don't have to have soy in everything, but maybe do a little bit of label reading and really see what foods in your house have some of the more processed soy and try to limit those, right? The argument could also be some of the other things in processed foods might be promoting a little bit of that hormone shift, not just the soy. Is there a recommended amount of edamame and or soy ferment to stay under? So again, I think that kind of just goes with my last statement. What I would really recommend is you don't have to have a certain amount. It's not like you have to have less than 20 grams or something like that. But again, read your labels, see where some of that more processed soy is coming from, and stick to some of this whole edamame for a snack or those type of things. Tofu, if you like that, and just try to limit some of the other process. I know I got a little redundant there, so I apologize about that. How do you transition away from the meat, potatoes lifestyle? Sometimes just not seeing meat, rice, then veggie might subconsciously make me feel hungry. That is a beautiful question, and thank you so much for bringing that up. Let me share a little bit about that. I think the biggest thing from transitioning to meat and potato is we have a heartiness, right? We're used to having a little bit more fulfillment of a meal. And sometimes plant-based meals can get a rap of being underfilling or not enough. Again, I can't stress the importance of protein inclusion at these meals to make sure that you're feeling a little bit more hearty there. But some easy transitions to start is, for example, adding something like a mushroom or a texturizer to some of your ground meat. So you're using a little less ground meat, maybe a little bit more mushroom. For tacos or something like that, go ahead and substitute half black beans or half pinto beans for your meat products. Start there, and just doing a little bit of that division can be a really great way to include more plants without going just cold turkey from meat. And of course, potatoes you can include at any time because they are plant-based. There are a lot of meat substitutes out there. Now, I just did mention that that does get a little bit into the more processed soy category depending what you choose. So I wouldn't say do those all the time, but those can be a great way to have a little bit more heartiness if you're looking for that. My third recommendation here is really finding some recipes that have more of a heartiness to it, like this with some quinoa mixed in and maybe like some hummus and dip on the side. That can be a really hearty meal, and that might be just a little shift in changing our perspective, but you can still get that full plate balance that you're looking for, maybe adding a little bit more of the heartier plant-based options. And some of those heartier plant-based options, of course, are edamame, tofu could be one, but your beans and legumes, quinoa, nuts and seeds are going to be great ways to get a little bit more of that heartiness versus just having a plate of lettuce, right? That's not going to fill most of us up. So just one thought there. And then the other thing about still feeling hungry, again, this can be a little bit of a perspective. Like if we're used to having 2 breasts of chicken with every meal, that can be a difficult transition, right? So again, just start small by paring down a little bit of the meat, adding a little bit more of the vegetable. But another good tip on that is eat slowly, right? Sometimes we eat super quickly, especially with these like plant-based options. And we tend to kind of miss out on that earlier fullness, or we're waiting for the more extreme fullness that we might get from eating a bigger meal. So eat slowly, take your time, and choose some of these heartier foods. Make sure to include a plant-based protein, or start just dwindling down some of your animal proteins and subbing in some of those plant-based proteins. I hope that helped answer your question. Let me know if I did not, or if you want some more tips. All right. Let's see what else we have here. You said earlier that looking up recipes online is helpful in keeping plant-based. Can you talk more about that? Yes. So again, I think it's very common to kind of get stuck in just like, I'm going to have carrots and hummus and a salad, right? Or something like that. Or we kind of stick to hot and cold items, right? Or if we kind of just have more abstract meals, right, when we're plant-based. So what I encourage is trying to look for recipes that have a nice variety of food groups included and might be similar to what we might normally get if we're choosing a meat option. For instance, first thing that just came to mind, a stir fry, right? Generally, we would have stir fry with shrimp or beef or chicken and veggies. Really easy to just go heavy on the veggies, right? Look at some different stir fries with different vegetable combinations. Maybe add tofu if you want to, or some mushrooms for a little bit of that meaty texture. Really simple way to switch over. I also recommend thinking about the foods that you do like that include meat and looking for a recipe that you might be able to do more plant-based. So lasagna, right? That's classic with meat. There's a lot of really great vegetable lasagna recipes out there. So look for things that you like in the meat world that can easily be translated to a plant-based option. Okay, those flavors, textures, temperatures is what's going to keep you engaged and satisfied. So you're not like, oh, forget it, I'm done with this plant-based. It's just a bunch of kale and I'm going to go back to my meat and potatoes, right? Or my meat for that instance. So, so that's kind of what I mean. And I think too, look for inspiration. We have so many great, or so much access to so many great recipes and information on the lovely internet that you can literally type in like easy vegetarian recipes, see what comes up, what looks good, what looks tasty, and we can always tweak recipes based on what we have at home, what we like, we don't like. I hope that helped. Okay. There are a lot of vegan chefs on YouTube and Instagram. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I want to say this. Vegetarianism, veganism, plant-based in general can look different from everybody. And one of the things I notice the most is we try to put it in a box, like what one person is doing, we need to do it that way. You bring up Instagram and YouTube, there's a gal that's like the banana lady or someone like that. She's always my favorite to reference, but all she does is like eat 50 bananas a day. I hate bananas. That's not a lifestyle for me. I would die. So what I would recommend is really figuring out simple ways that you can make this change or maintain this change without doing what everybody else is doing. As far as vegan chefs go, though, great way to get some inspiration on food ideas, things that you maybe didn't think about that you can easily transition a couple ingredients to make it vegan. Really great options out there. So I love that you brought that up. And yes, recipes are easy to follow and the videos are helpful. I love it. Great point. All right. Do we have some other questions? I'd love to hear them. This is my favorite part, is chatting with you all and hearing what you have going on. Let me see what we're missing here, if anything. Bum, 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 bum. Okay. Well, I do want to mention too, as we're talking a little bit about plant-based and how we can adjust it. Remember when we're taking out some of the animal proteins or animal proteins and animal byproducts, that's what I was trying to say, we might lose out a little bit on that fullness capacity. And that's why I did, of course, stress the importance of protein. But I do want to also mention that it is important to eat frequently throughout the day when you are choosing a more plant-based diet, right? Because we're getting a little bit less of that heavier fullness. So I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, 3 meals a day, 6 times a day, however many times you want to eat. What I do recommend is making sure to eat frequently, at least 3 times a day. Great if you can do 4. Base it a little bit on your hunger fullness levels, but make sure to include a variety of your food groups: whole grains, fruits, vegetables, proteins, plant-based proteins, I should specify. Include those with each meal that you're going through without the day. So we're not losing nutrients. We're not feeling fatigued, tired, right? We're still getting that energy support that we need, and we're feeling fulfilled with our food and our food choices. Okay. All right, cool. All right. Ooh, portion size per meal. Good question. Is that specific to portion of protein per meal or a full meal in general? And while I wait to hear from you, thoughts on lentils. Lentils are phenomenal. They're one of my favorite foods and one of the richest protein sources you can get as far as legumes and plant-based go. What I also like about them is they're super versatile. Of course, you can make them whole, you can mix them in with things. They go with so many different flavors. Wonderful option. You can always cook them in a crock pot if you want to do that a little bit more quickly. Stovetop, whatever it is, great, great choice. I definitely recommend lentils, and they're delicious, in my personal opinion. Good question. Any good recommendations on adding flavor cooking to quinoa legumes? Great, great question. I love it. One good tip with quinoa is cooking it in like a vegetable stock. So where you would normally do the water, you could either do half vegetable stock or all of that vegetable stock. That can really pull in a little bit of flavor. And I really recommend adding some things into your quinoa for a little bit of flavor, right? We generally substitute that for like a rice and it kind of just stands on its own. But I really like to mix in, like I said, this kind of recipe could be delicious. I love doing like a Greek style quinoa with like olives and tomato and cucumber and a little bit of dressing. Add some stuff in there, give it a little bit of flavor and sustenance. That can be really good. And then again, using the stock for a little bit of extra flavor on the jump. The quinoa comes out looking like mush. Also, a tip with the quinoa, I make mine in my rice cooker and I just do it on the brown rice setting. Comes out perfect every time. It doesn't overcook and you don't have to babysit it over the stovetop. So if you have a rice cooker at home or are willing to purchase one, again, I do the brown rice setting on there. That can be a really great way to include that. Okay. All right. Whole meal in general. Okay. So I don't have my food models with me. I wish I did. But when we're thinking about portions, remember that this does adjust per person. So I'm going to make a general statement here, but please note that some people might eat more, some people might eat less. What we generally recommend for a meal, firstly, is at least 3 food groups to 4 per plate, right? So when we're thinking about when we're really making a nice portion meal, we have our protein source, whether it be plant-based or animal. We have our carbohydrate source, fruit and or vegetable, right? Actually, let me grab a plate while we're chatting through this and I can work it through. Okay. Got my plate here. Sorry, my pregnant belly is lifting my shirt up. Okay, so we have our plate. I like to do about a 9-inch plate or 8-inch plate is a really good place to start. We don't want to go too small or too restricted, but we don't want to go over either. So what I recommend, since this is going to be our protein, right? Protein sources, we generally recommend about 1 to 2 protein servings per meal. And a protein serving is going to be about a palm size or the size of a deck of cards. I always remember P protein, palm for protein. Okay. So it's about this palm size or size of a deck of cards. So although I put this on the plate, you get the drift. If it's especially like a leaner protein, I recommend about 1 to 2 of those per meal. Again, that protein is something we tend to not eat as much of, especially if we're doing a lot of dine out and takeout. They tend to make the protein the smallest portion. So like if you're cooking at home, maybe do some ground chicken and black beans or something like that to kind of combine. The next category is going to be carbohydrates. So on average, 1 serving of carbohydrate is about a fist size, and we recommend about 2 to 3 depending on your meal for that. I don't have a carbohydrate handy, but it would look something like this. Again, 1 to 2. And we generally recommend more of those whole grain carbohydrates whenever available. And then the second half of the plate, we usually recommend all veggies, right? And that's about 1 standard meal. Now, I say standard to say that that does vary per person, but that can be a good reference point for about what a meal looks like. For a snack, I generally recommend about 2 food groups or about 2 servings of food items. So we have our protein and a little bit of dairy covered here. I might even add some nuts on the side or something like that to add a little bit more oomph. Or maybe a carbohydrate. Maybe I want some chips or crackers or something to go on the side of this. That would be a good size to gauge for a snack. I hope that helped, Elaine. I know I talked very quickly, so tell me if I missed something. All right, we have some new messages here. Bear with me. Okay. Bum, 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 bum. Ooh, yes. So we have a note here about a common meal growing up with pinto beans, pico de gallo, and buttered corn tortillas. Yes, and it's naturally vegetarian. That's beautiful. You could also do the same with that and substituting rice or quinoa if you wanted to get crazy. And I'm sure it was very tasty, even though it's vegetarian, right? Vegetarian can be delicious. When I eat salads, I'm always more tired of eating before I actually feel full. Jason, I hear you. Are you saying you get kind of fatigued probably from eating salads? My recommendation, choose something good on the side of that salad, or something that's maybe has a little bit more appeal to you. For example, maybe do like a really easy non-flatbread, right, to go as part of your salad, or maybe a soup or something to pair with, or half of a sandwich. That can give you a little bit more desire, and that way you're not fatigued from eating your food and you're like, oh, I don't want to eat this salad anymore, but I'm still hungry, right? So mix and match some items with it, and don't feel like your whole meal has to be just that one salad. All right. Any recommendations? Yes, on the gas from beans and legumes. Great, great question. Okay. So flatulence is very common, of course, with some of our beans and legumes. What I would recommend is, first and foremost, if you're doing canned, make sure to rinse them. Rinse them off of all the preservative juice that's in there, and just use them whole and flavor them yourself. That's a great way to reduce flatulence. That's my biggest tip. Rinse them, rinse them, rinse them, and then use them. The other option could be getting like a gas X or something like that. But I find when I rinse my beans and legumes, we're good. We have a tip here, drinking mint tea to deal with gas from eating beans. Okay. Again, I recommend trying rinsing them, and then also think about the portion. You don't have to go too crazy on beans, right? But try to do like about one of those servings, see how that feels, so you're not kind of overwhelming the system. You know, sometimes gas can also be a side effect of something we might eat with beans and legumes. For example, I'm thinking black bean quesadilla, right? Or something like that. It could be some of the lactose that could be promoting gas and some of those other things. So think about what you're eating with those beans and legumes and see if mixing and matching some of those combinations doesn't help as well. All righty. Love these questions. Love it so much. Do we have any more questions, thoughts, or feelings on today? I hope you all enjoyed the recipe, and I hope you'll try it. And I also hope that you learned something, or maybe are inspired to add in some more plant-based meals. I know we have our Chef Doc doing some great recipes next week, and then I'll be back with a soup recipe the third week, and then I think Doc's up again that last week of January. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. If nobody has any other questions, I'm looking here. Seaweed. Oh, I've heard putting seaweed like sushi wrappers in hot water when boiling dried beans can help. I haven't heard that, but that's an interesting tip. So putting the seaweed wrappers with the boiling beans. Okay, that's an interesting thing. I have not heard about that, but I'm going to try it because I'm intrigued. But again, sometimes that rinsing can really help. Okay, cool. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you all so much. I'm so glad it was helpful. That makes me happy to hear. That's why we're here. We want to provide you with helpful information and support some of your nutrition changes. So again, if you have any questions or anything like that, I think you can just email me through the Harmony Nutrition. It's just info@harmonynutritionatl.com. I'd love to hear your questions, comments, concerns. And I hope that you'll join us every Tuesday the rest of this week to talk more about plant-based. And I'd love if you all had a great rest of your week. So take care. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you soon.